This is Words Aptly Spoken, which comes from Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. The written word is a precious treasure. We want to preserve written knowledge for God's glory and as an anchor to the history of the church and its classical conversations. We hope to encourage the reading of words and of the word. Oh, welcome to Words Aptly Spoken, where Jennifer Courtney, Tim Knotts, and I discuss books from the Classical Conversations curriculum. Today is Monday, February 5th, 2024, and I am Lee Bortons. We are joined today with two guests. Tim could not be with us today, so we have both Kelly Wilt and Lisa Bailey. They are curriculum developers for Classical Conversations Multimedia. Kelly, you haven't been on for a while, so why don't you introduce yourself, and then Lisa, why don't you give us a brief reminder of who you are when Kelly's finished?
All right.
Thanks so much, Lee. I'm excited to be a guest on the book club today. I am an ardent lover of all things foundations related. And aside from working with the curriculum development team, I also serve as the MC for the National Memory Master Competition. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you.
And I'm Lisa Bailey, and I have loved classical conversations for a whole lot of years and have spent most of my years with CC working with Challenge B and Challenge 1 students and encouraging parents that they can do this big, hairy, audacious task of homeschooling their kids. And one of the things that I take a great deal of pleasure in currently is hosting the Everyday Educator podcast.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Otherwise, I would have. You did an excellent job, Lisa, and people really are encouraged by you. So thank you both for being here to encourage our next bunch of people listening to our podcast. So, Jennifer, why don't you tell us about this month's shows? It's February, so new shows.
Yep, new shows this month. So we're going to talk about some extra resources for that homeschooling journey. Today, we're going to talk about Prescripts cursive writing series, and then we're going to look at the products that have really long names, the classical acts and facts history cards, the classical acts and facts artist and composer cards, and classical music for dummies.
Thank you. I look forward to that. And for those of you that look forward to it, you can go to leebortons.com, my personal website, and there's links to all the upcoming book clubs, as well as if it's a book that can be purchased, a link to our bookstore, classicalconversationsbooks.com. And you can also listen to the archives of the previous episodes. We started this in January 2023, so we have a lot of episodes of material at Lee Bortons on my YouTube channel. So thank you for participating and helping me make all this great conversations, gals.
Yeah, it's great.
It's fun. All right. So Lee, tell us why this Prescripts series. So today we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about many books in a series. So why is the Prescripts series in the Classical Conversations curriculum?
Yeah, so I was looking at what we offer at classicalconversationsbooks.com because these were all made after my children were out of elementary and middle school years and into those high school years. So I've heard that my grandbabies are using them, so I'm not as familiar with them, though I was in on the launching of them. There's I think 8 to choose from, and I'm sure we'll talk more about what they are. They're all available at classicalconversationsbooks.com. And one of the reasons we put them in here was that there was this transition that those of us on the podcast today can remember, where we went from no internet. We actually probably all used to work on typewriters and then handwritten paper. And then all of a sudden it seemed like nobody was writing by hand anymore, and it was becoming a lost art. And one thing that cursive writing, which is Prescripts, emphasizes that is important is the hand-eye coordination. And for children who are dyslexic, it can be a super big help in helping them learn to read. So we wanted to put together something that preserved the classical idea of a cursive handwriting besides print and block, and to incorporate that at the same time with maybe some of your younger children that weren't really ready for essays and articles that went along with IEW or maybe extensive memory work. But why not have them use cursive to practice the memory work they were going to be learning? And so each of the books has a theme that hopefully, one of which will engage your children, and especially if they have big brothers and sisters already doing work that's related to it, they can feel included too.
Yeah, I appreciate that you gave that history. Interestingly, my unrelated to this podcast, because no one that was in this conversation knew about it. My mother was telling my children this weekend about her senior English final, which of course was handwritten. And not only was it handwritten, they had to do it in blue ink, and there were no erasable pens, and they were not allowed to use whiteout. And so they just had, every time they made a mistake, they just had to stop and copy again and make sure that handwriting was neat. And I was telling her that there are many instructors that I interact with on social media who are talking about going back to handwritten papers as a way of dealing with AI. if it's handwritten, it is original to the student. So anyway, with that introduction, Kelly, we mentioned that there are a lot of books in this series. And so they are, if you look on our website, you'll notice that they're color coded orange, red, green, and blue. So tell us about the whole series and how families can use it at home.
Absolutely. So when I was asked to be a guest for this podcast, I actually went through all of our family's homeschooling mementos and found a huge stack of these because our family has known and loved the Prescripts series for many years. And you're right, if you go to the Classical Conversations bookstore website and you search Prescripts, you will see a rainbow of different books that you can utilize at different points in your family's homeschooling journey. So thinking back over our family's time in CC, we used these in many different ways. As we talk more about the contents of each book and each level, you can use your imagination with your children, just like I did, to make the cursive handwriting practice something they look forward to, because you're cultivating more skills than simply handwriting, which was, when we began our journey, what I thought the sole purpose of Prescripts was. And I soon learned that was not the only purpose, just like Lee has already alluded to. So as you look through the series, what you will find is a mix of memory work that can be copied by hand, different art lessons woven throughout, and each Prescripts book has one thing in common. It is engaging and visually beautiful to help your child cultivate that skill of hand-eye coordination. So throughout our family's years of using Prescripts, we have used this as part of our morning time around the table as we played music together. We've used it just as an impromptu art lesson where we all pulled out our Prescripts books. I believe at one point I had all three of mine in different Prescripts books at once, which was a fun, busy year. But like I said, you can use these different books at many levels to meet that need, not only to review memory work, but also to build those core skills of hand-eye coordination as well.
Yeah. So we have these orange books that are letters. You correct me if I get this wrong. Red is basically words, green is sentences, and blue, I think, is passages. So that's color coded to help you know roughly where you might want to start. So if you have a little bitty, orange would be for you.
Right. I can remember when we first, my youngest students would always begin in the orange books, and then we would progress forward, and they were always excited to see a new color come onto the table to begin working. So typically a foundation student would move from orange into green, and then from green into red, and then finally from red into blue. And I know many challenge students who I have recommended to continue to copy through the blue books, even through their challenge years after seeing their handwriting in community.
Well, and that's one of the reasons we have the workspaces in Latin, so that they can move on to copying the Latin sentences that they're translating. So we're just very aware that the idea of writing things on paper helps with a lot of different skills, and so we don't drop it once they are a little, get older.
Yeah, I thought maybe you could build on that a little bit, Lisa, just to talk about, because I know you've been helpful with our Scribblers curriculum. You led the way there. So talk to us a little bit about writing and the drawing that's in them.
Well, I love it. And I'm kind of like Lee. My kids did not use this at home. We didn't have it when they were of the age to do it. but I'm super looking forward to using it with my grandchildren. And so I have been going back through and seeing what I missed and what I'm going to get to do. And what I discovered is that I love exactly what Kelly said. It's going to really build the skills of hand-eye coordination, but also attention to detail, the direction that we encourage our students to draw and write in, attention to detail, love of beauty in the artwork that we produce, and then attention to detail and content as well. And so in those early books, Jennifer, that you were talking about, and Kelly mentioned that usually that's where your foundations kids will start. And your scribblers kids would start with the cursive letters and the coloring. And the thing I love about it is that, I've met lots of parents who say, well, my child doesn't even know how to hold their pencil. Well, you don't start with the pencil, you start with the finger, because they can control their finger a lot more easily than they can control an implement. And so those orange books begin by asking the student to trace this letter with their finger and then progress on. And so in the orange series, it's history, and it comes straight from our Acts and Facts history cards, medieval to modern. You're just tracing simple letters and pictures. You're tracing the pictures that go along with the history sentences for medieval to modern, and then world history too. And then when you progress on to words, in the red books, the students work on tracing and then copying cursive words and drawing, and we use scripture. So we're training their mind and kind of inspiring them. And they do short words and really short sentences, and they draw just simple images. And also in the red series, there's some math terms. So they copy simple math terms and they draw from nature, which is really important. And in Scribblers, you guys will remember we do a lot of nature drawing. In the green, like you guys mentioned, we graduate to writing sentences in cursive, and really there's more art lessons. So you are encouraging their love of beauty. After they have seen the beauty that God has put into nature, we show them some other beautiful artwork that art masters have created. So we're still working with history, ancient history, medieval and modern history, and even American history. And they will move on to copying cursive sentences, and then not tracing pictures, but actually recreating the pictures. So they'll look at a piece of artwork, and then, and one of the things that I love the most in this green series I had forgotten about is that they're help for the parents. Because, if you are a non-art kind of person and your child says, I'm supposed to draw this picture, I don't even know where to start with this blank paper. The cool thing is there's some helps for parents in the prescripts. It teaches you as the parent how to draw from a grid, how to draw from blobbing, using mapping to draw, and is a really easy add skill that you can do along with your kids. Just get yourself some plain paper and draw with them too. And then in the blue series, we do work up to passages of history that come out of our American documents. There's some really great poetry, and we work on creating some beautiful illuminations. It's awesome. I can't wait. I wish that I had done it with my girls, but I'm definitely doing it with my grandkids.
Yeah. And I got to use it with all but one of mine, I think. So 3 of mine used it. And I really appreciated this simple drawing instructions and the idea of imitating what they saw.
Yes.
Some of mine could really draw well, and some found it very frustrating. And so they could really follow those step-by-step instructions, both for their cursive handwriting and their drawings. So that was
Yeah.
nice.
Yes.
Something made me think about was how, like for me, if someone asked me to read Egyptian hieroglyphics, I couldn't do it, right? And so what's happening is cursive is becoming just like that. Modern children can't even read it, and that's just one generation away, not thousands of years away. So that's another benefit of it. So I loved how Kelly mentioned, and then you piggybacked on that, Lisa, doing it at the table as a family, because I'm thinking of another family who did use it, and while their younger children were using Prescripts, she went ahead and got calligraphy books for the high school
Oh,
students. And they
yeah.
listened to classical music and they treated it as an art class. And so to this day, the two older kids that I know have amazing handwriting. So
Mm.
it's well worth their time.
That's great. Yeah. You want to be able to go to places like I just went, the little Laura Ingalls Wilder's house, and read
Oh,
her letters back and forth to
yes.
her sisters. And if you don't know cursive, you can't read her precious letters.
Or even the birthday cards from your grandmother.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, in a minute, we're going to start reading some passages from the book, and then we might have a little show and tell. But first, Lee, can you take us to our break?
Yeah, so it's time to thank classicalconversationsbooks.com, where the books discussed can be purchased. We have the entire 2023 Words Aptly Spoken calendar at leebortons.com with links to the CC book site. And we just really appreciate just the opportunity to link each of these videos by the book that we refer to. So parents know if they listen to this video, they know why they're buying the book and some tips for using the book. So I just really encourage everyone to read these before you click that buy button. You won't hear that from many vendors, right? Just buy the darn book, but not from us. We want you to know God and to make him known, and so to use the resources you have well.
Nice. Thanks, Lee. All right. So we're going to start our close reading of the text, which sounds funny since we're talking about a cursive writing book. We do have a few important paragraphs to highlight from the opening materials of the books. So Lee, there is a little paragraph in the introduction to the books that explains this title, Prescripts, and I'm always curious about titles. So can you read that to us?
Sure. The word prescript comes from the Latin words pre, meaning before or in front of, plus scribere, to write. The Prescripts series from Classical Conversations Multimedia is designed to precede, to come before writing. Just as we learn to speak by mimicking our parents' words, we can learn to write well by copying the words that others have written. Even though coloring, drawing, tracing, and copying are simple tasks from an adult perspective, imitation is at the heart of a classical education. Rather than resorting to mindless busy work that isolates handwriting from the rest of education, the Prescripts series is designed to complement the world of knowledge students include as they mature.
One thing I noticed as you were reading is the second sentence, the Prescript series from Classical Conversations Multimedia is designed to precede or come before writing. And that might seem weird since we're talking about them writing. What we meant was before a composition, before they start writing their own essays, they can learn a lot by copying. And that's a lesson that we're trying to reclaim in classical education. So what did everybody else hear?
I liked the part about it's not mindless busy work, because I remember handwriting when I was in school. I remember having classes, having instruction and handwriting. And sometimes it did seem like mindless busy work because what I was copying off of the board did not seem to have anything to do with anything else that was ever said. And so what I love about Prescripts is that what we have our children copying is actually the good content that they are hearing in foundations, that they are being read from the backs of the classical acts and facts cards. And so it's never mindless. And even children who are so young that they're not maybe doing the memory work on purpose, they are still getting to do the same kind of activity that their older siblings are doing.
I think the part that stands out to me is the statement, imitation is at the heart of a classical education. And I used to think that that meant that we were only imitating what others had created, but I've realized throughout our family's journey, a classical education for my children quite often means they're imitating me. And when I think through our journey, the things that are the most memorable when we sit around a table and we talk about our CC memories are the times that I got right in there and had fun with my children. And I can remember I had two little boys who loved making messes. And so quite often our handwriting lessons would begin with a can of shaving cream and the kitchen countertop. And we would come in and I would show them how to form a letter with my finger writing in the shaving cream. And they would love smearing it. And by the time we were finished, our whole kitchen smelled like Barbasol.
Yes.
But it was so wonderful because then we would take that and we would wash hands at the sink and we would go to the table and I would pull out tin cans. That was how I'd organize our school supplies, and different cans wrapped in duct tape. And I'd pull out the tin cans with the colored pencils and we would make rainbow letters. And I was right there with them doing it. So not only were they imitating good handwriting skills, they were imitating mom, having fun in there, being the first Prescripts student in our family. And I think that made the biggest impact on them moving forward as classical students, hopefully for the rest of their lives, that they lead by example, just like I did. But there are days now and now as we look forward to grandchildren in our next stage of life, I'm looking forward to digging out some cans of shaving cream again.
Yes.
Well, and for those people who didn't the first time around, they get to do it again.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, I may be putting you on the spot, Lee, but I wanted to, because we were sharing all these great memories. I remember one of the first articles that I read that you read, I think it might have been a catalog, was about you going to a Jamaican, I think it was in Jamaica, a mission school where the kids were doing lots and lots of copy work. And your initial response also was, that's really boring. And then you realized a lot of things were happening. Do you want to touch on that memory?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of going for 2 weeks to give the teacher down there a break at a mission school. And substitute teacher, you make everything simple, I suppose. And I was kind of frustrated the first few days because I just thought there's so many more fun activities that children could be doing. And after a few days of watching them doing what felt like rote grammar work, memorization, timelines, handwritings, all the things that we do now in foundations, I realized that third day in that those kids knew way more information and had a larger context to how thinking and just how things fit together. And I realized that my modern presuppositions were all wrong, and that they were engaged in really important brain training and body control. And these children were all about like under 8.
Yeah. I had a similar experience, and I went to our local one-room schoolhouse, and they do a school day from the land run years of Oklahoma, because that's when this particular school opened. And similar to what we've just described, it was a little bit extra fun because they gave them inkwells. So I realized that was part of the fascination was the inkwell. But she would just put, beautiful scripture, or they copied what the older kids copied the Pledge of Allegiance. So depending on their ability, she had just put lots of things in cursive on the board, and they were learning a lot while copying. And then she could move around and talk to the other groups of kids too. So it was fun.
It is such a skill that's like just missing now, because all you got to do is look down. That's what children do, is they look down. Right. But to have a big board and a piece of paper in front of you, you got to look up and down and up and down and up and down, while the kids all around you are throwing things and distracting you. So it's much more like real life in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Kelly, do you want to read us a little more of the introduction? And this time I want us to be thinking about, what is the purpose of bringing this back?
Absolutely. And I love that this touches similarly on what I was just saying about our job as classical educators. Our job as classical educators is to teach students to make the effort to be neat, but even more, it is to encourage them to aim higher by teaching them to write beautifully. Many schools no longer teach cursive writing, claiming that it is too difficult to master. Teaching a child to write in cursive does require diligence and patience, but it has a number of compelling benefits. Research suggests that cursive writing more effectively develops manual skill and dexterity. Cursive may also aid students struggling with dyslexia or dysgraphia because 1, capital and lowercase letters are distinct. 2, Each word is one fluid movement, so the child's rhythm is not disrupted by frequent pauses. And 3, letters like lowercase b and lowercase d are more difficult to reverse.
I appreciate that. And a lot of the letters, some of them are harder to form, but a lot of them are easier to form. So I know that in our home, before Prescripts, we had the book Handwriting Without Tears, which I often cried through every
A
page.
misnomer.
I'll say misnomer because my son could see the letter in his head, but getting his hand to make it was hard. And particularly making a lowercase e is hard. And I thought she was so clever telling them to hit a ball with a bat straight and then go around the bases. And you would think that would appeal to him, but he still could not get that lowercase e to come out. It's much easier to make a cursive lowercase e than it is to make a printed lowercase e. So
One thing I like about these paragraphs you've had us point out or read is that put together, they show you that there's actually a pedagogical plan to anybody that wants to pay attention to it. And it only takes not a few minutes a day even, but maybe a few minutes a week if you do it over a lifetime. And Lisa, you started out with that, describing the various colors. So a lot of parents, they want their 12, 13, 14-year-old to write an essay or type an essay or whatever it is. Somehow they want them to express a lot of words. And they don't realize that they didn't give the child enough fundamental practice before they had that expectation. And so if every day you have your little itty bitties just writing a word in the sand or a few words on a piece of paper, then you move on to the phrases that we have, and then to the sentences, and then to the passages. Then when you say, I need you to write a whole paragraph, it's not a bridge too far. And then in the midst of doing all that, going slow and steady, I called it milk the cow in my Echo and Celebration book. Just a little bit a day. Love your children as much as as a farmer loves his cows. And through doing that, you'll begin to identify better the dyslexic and dysgraphic issues because you're expecting small things and you're setting up a standard that they could reach and feel successful at, because there are tiers in doing anything that's new that requires a child's brain to engage in their body. And we adults just don't, I think, appreciate how hard it is for them.
It's asking them to do a bunch of things at the same time, right? Sit correctly, hold their pencil correctly or their finger, hold their paper correctly, learn how to move it. And then if you're asking them to copy, it's the eye tracking. And so it's lots of things and to do at one time. And our little children can become discouraged if we don't have a long runway. If we just all of a sudden expect them to do 2 or 3 of those things at the same time, then it's very frustrating to them and they don't want to do what is painful. But if we start with the long runway, it's not painful. It's sort of like playing. And if we get them while it is fun to imitate us, then that's more pleasant for everybody.
Lisa, I think you hit on something when you're talking about it being painful. I think as parents, we just have to have a recognition of what our children are capable of and how much we can expect them to do in order to stretch them, not to break them, but just keep them stretching forward.
Right.
I can remember with all 3 of mine, their little hands would get sore. And so I would say, wiggle them, jiggle them, and stretch. And we would do these little hand exercises, or I would have a ball of Play-Doh and I would say, okay, when, you finish this line, then I want you to grab your ball of Play-Doh and roll it into a snake. So they were wiggling those fingers, they were exercising their fingers. And I can remember with my boys, I would actually say, when you get to the end of this page, you need to stop what you're doing and run around the table 6 times as fast as you can.
Yes.
And just doing things like that, just to make it fun and interesting and interactive, tapping into that desire to play when they're young. And then realizing that obviously we're not going to have challenge students who I look at when they're in the blue book going, okay, when you get
Run
to the end
around
of
the desk.
you never know. I mean, that might be what works. But thinking about how do we get them to stretch from, only tracing, with shaving cream or hair gel or whatever is on hand, to get to the point where they can, like Lee said, sit for extended periods of time, utilize that hand-eye coordination, think about creating something that is not only functional but beautiful.
Beautiful.
We have to think of that as being a journey and not simply a destination. Because if we think of it as, okay, well, they're not there, so they failed, then we've failed before we've helped them to get where they need to go. So I love that idea of thinking about awareness about what they're capable of, and thinking about, what would make it, if I were a little person or not so little person, what would give me the endurance to do my very best? And tapping into that type of energy, I think, is a good thing with our students.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to be, I think attentiveness, you hit it on the head, because my son wanted to know, they are fascinated by what we're doing. They see us writing and they see it, and they want in on the secret, but sometimes they're not quite ready. And so in his case, he really wanted to learn letters and copy words. But he was very frustrated by making them small. And so one of the things we did when I realized that was I took him out on the driveway and I
Yes.
lots of things for him to copy large in sidewalk chalk. The driveway is much bigger than a sheet of paper. And so we would cover the driveway in words first as a way to get him there. So, all right. Well, Lisa, you want to read us our last intro paragraph?
Yes, I love this. When children are learning to write, what they study matters as much as how they study it. Parents are more likely to give up on cursive when the content seems frivolous. So, Classical Conversation is pleased to offer cursive writing books that give the student plenty of practice using rich, meaningful content. With Prescripts cursive writing books, your student can become a confident writer while learning or reviewing important subject matter such as scripture, definitions of math terms, history sentences, and passages of literature.
Yeah, long before they know what the scripture means, they can begin understanding by copying. And I've seen that with my kids where that's a layer of understanding those hard words.
It's interesting because you guys could probably come up with some analogies that have nothing to do with writing. So one of the ones I like to use a lot is that I teach my children to say thank you and I'm sorry before they're actually thankful or really sorry.
Right.
And they may not, and as they get older, they may not be thankful or sorry at all. And I still say you're going to say it because we will practice the best ways of doing things, whether we mean it yet or not. So same thing with the handwriting. Your child may not really quite care what it is that they're copying, but you're going to make sure it's things that are going to benefit them as they move on.
Absolutely. I've heard a number of foundations families rave because their children are practicing the history sentences in text as well, and just integrating that practice along with the memory work on a weekly basis is so very valuable to them.
You looked like you were having a thought, Lisa.
Well, I was going to say that for my kids, well, for one of my children especially, anything that didn't seem to have a purpose or a meaning behind it, she felt free to balk at. What does this mean? This is silly. There's not a purpose. Why am I doing this? And so it was helpful to us to say, okay, so this is another way of practicing your memory work. If I had something, because before there was Prescripts, I did handwriting with them, and we tried to copy. I a lot of times would find a poem that I had read to her, and she would copy that. And then she would realize, oh, I'm learning how to copy this. And so she would make things for her room, or a lot of times we played restaurant at our house. And so she would have her notepad and she would go around and take people's order. And she had to write it neatly enough that the cook could read the order. And so that was just enough of a game or a story that it appealed to her.
I like that. We did that in our house too. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, but we would be remiss in this episode if we did not show what this actually looks like. So we do have a little slideshow of some samples by actual real children.
We
Although
have some of those.
This is my daughter Abby's, and so I'm laughing as I say actual real children, because if I tried to copy this picture of Stalin, it would not look this good. So
Wow.
she really got into this one for some reason. So
She did a great job.
Do you know how old she was?
she was older. She was, let's see, she was probably 11. It was probably her
Mhm.
last year in foundation. So she had been doing cursive handwriting and copying these drawings for a while at that point. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you notice she even had figured out enough about art to know that she needed to
She
sign.
had to sign it.
I love her signature at the bottom. That's great.
Beautiful.
That's great.
It's in cursive.
Yes.
So
Very good. Very good. Well, I have some of my children's work to share as well, different levels. So you can see here, this was probably about age 6 for my eldest. And this was from the World History book. And you can see for fun, we glued cotton balls on to be somehow the surface of the moon because he thought it was springy and bouncy. But he loved that. And I can remember, putting glue down and sprinkling glitter. That didn't happen very often after the first time, but salt and different things to give the book texture on the art pages as well. And then on the next
And
one,
how old was this child?
let's see. Looking back at that one, I would say he was 5, 6. He was young, but of my 3, he was the one that was most content to sit and imitate and to make it beautiful. So he paid really close attention to those cursive letters in this book. All right. And then as we moved on to the green books, like we were talking about before, this is one of our history sentences from cycle 3. And Lisa, I must have ordered him from the same factory as your daughter because he
Yes.
knows the purpose. And so you can see here how he's beginning to connect those letters together to
Mhm.
make words long words like opportunity and immigrants.
Immigrants.
Yes. And we had to work a lot on spacing between words because he wanted to make one long alphabet sandwich, I guess, or spaghetti noodle. So he's quite proud when he wrote long sentences like this. So I would say this was moving up into, this is 10, 11, getting older. And again, this was my one that was most content to sit and to copy. And then on the next one, this was
Oh,
from the same book. I should have had a clue at this point that he would become an ardent lover of history and government because he was determined to illustrate the history sentences. So you can see here his Civil War soldiers from our history sentences in cycle 3. And I love the fact that this was such a clue to the person he was becoming. And I think I didn't recognize it at that point. And now looking back, it just is such a glimmer of goodness from the Lord to see these little breadcrumbs throughout his work. Now, this was in moving forward into the red books. So this is the scripture book, and you can see here it begins very simply reviewing what they learn in the earlier books, reviewing what does this digit look like, smaller words, and then connecting them together to create a sentence. And I love this sentence, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So it's connecting the idea of math and God's word, which is a wonderful integration. So this was actually this was a little bit later. Actually, I take that back. This was my second son who was I had to pull out a bag of tricks. We did a lot of running around the table, but he still, you can see here, would produce beautiful work. He was very invested in making it beautiful. And then in the next, so this is my youngest, who probably of the 3 was the most inclined to take her artistic pages and make them into something dramatic. So she, at this point, realized that her oldest brother was in Challenge 1 and reading The Taming of the Shrew. And we watched a performance of it, and she was fascinated by it. Now, this year, she is in Challenge 1. And so she has familiarity with The Taming of the Shrew. But she laughed today when I showed her this, and she said, Mom, why did I make her dress look like a pizza? Why did I give her black nails? But she was so fascinated because it was something that she was looking forward to. So she saw this as being very grown up, that her oldest brother was in Challenge 1. And she was younger when she did this. So the scripture book for her came earlier than it did for my boys because she had more exposure earlier on. Because I don't think we began with the books quite as early for them as we did for her. So she wanted to get in on what her brothers were doing. So we have a lovely chalice here.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed that one too, because it really shows our audience how Courtney Sanford, who designed these, gave them a couple of elements of one element first, and then in the second picture, a couple elements, and just walked them through exactly how to make
Yes.
this. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
That was fun,
That's
ladies. I
it.
think we're out of time, but that was fun to end with show and tell.
That was really fun.
Yes.
I just realized my camera had been on me hardly the whole day. So you just gotta see the top of my head. I'm like Kilroy. Anyway, thank you so much. Lee Bortons was here, and I'm glad that you all joined me, even though you're only half of me. So thank you, gals, and I'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.